Keeping well? Thank you so much. With much appreciation for everybody who's made it here this afternoon as we embark on this private sector dialogue as part of our commemoration of our 60 years of diplomacy. We really appreciate your presence, but I guess more importantly is that we are looking forward to having a very stimulating conversation around the past 60 years and what it has meant for foreign and commercial diplomacy, but I guess just as importantly, the next 60 years. To esteemed colleague, Principal Secretary for Foreign Affairs, much congratulations to you and your teams for this reflection, because this reflection we've had over the last few weeks and the publication of foreign policy is one of the landmark items that we really look forward to define the way we engage. I think in the interest of time, I'll just share very brief remarks, which hopefully will help us set the stage for the discussions that we want to have today. I think the world that we live in today is very different from the one that was there for 60 years back. In the world 60 years back, we had a very strong sort of state-led foreign affairs that basically mandated the interests of countries and also pushed the interests of the private sectors with it. Over time, we have begun to realize that the world is becoming more dynamic. The private sector is becoming a much stronger depository of issues that we initially thought were much in the province of the public sector. The private sector, as it advances its commercial objectives, also become important instruments for the advancement of public objectives. The private sector basically has become a very strong arbiter for how international rules on trade, international rules on investment, and international rules on the conduct of affairs generally are governed. Because of that, any country that wants to prosper internationally needs to have a very clear sense of how to leverage the assets of its private sector and to leverage these assets in a way that enables that country to become an effective participant in the international economy. And that's why we are here today. We are a country that is a hub for the continent. We are a country that is looking outward on our trade and investment objectives. We are a country that is keen to utilize market access that we are trying to gain internationally. But we are also living in a world whereby global supply chains are changing. We are living in a world whereby there are strong imperatives on how we should manage things like sustainable governance. We are also living in a world whereby a lot of the decisions of the public sector are shaped by private sector interests. So this afternoon we are calling upon you so that then we are able to have a conversation on what it will take for Kenya to leverage the assets that you have as a private sector to advance our next 60 years. And with those few remarks, it is my singular honor to invite esteemed colleague Principal Secretary for Foreign Affairs to share with us remarks and to help us proceed with the rest of the program. Karibu. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, my brother Alfred Kambudo, the Principal Secretary in charge of trade within the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry. Let me recognize all the distinguished colleagues who are here gathered. I want to recognize Dr. Stephen Jackson, the resident coordinator of the United Nations. I want to recognize Madam Caro Karaoke, the CEO of KICC. I want to recognize the president of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Republic, Eric Ruto. I want to recognize many captains of industry, particularly our friend, the CEO of Centum, James Moria, and many others who are here. We are gathered here within the context of our commemoration of 60 years of diplomacy by the Republic of Kenya. And it's been 60 years is a long time. We've done a great deal. We've done a great deal of good for Kenya. But we thought it was important for us to pause for a minute, maybe for a week, so that we could reflect together on what we have done that has actually had an impact for Kenya. And we wanted to give an opportunity to Kenyans to also feedback to us with regard to how they feel we have performed. We wanted to open ourselves up about how we do our business, because foreign policy is often, to many people, a very abstract thing. To many, it is foreign, and I think there is a challenge around the nomenclature itself. When it's characterized as foreign policy, it seems like we are serving someone other than Kenyans. And so I think we will be persuading those who draft, those who name different ministries and state departments, but perhaps to think also about the nomenclature, so that from the get-go there can be a good feeling that we do serve Kenyans. But most assuredly, we exist precisely to advance Kenya's national interests. And that is what we have done over the last 60 years. This week provides us an opportunity to be able to also look ahead in terms of how better we can do the business that we do. And we thought that in order for us to understand how to better advance our economic diplomacy imperative, we wanted to hear directly from members of the private sector. Okay, and that is essentially why we're here this afternoon. Suffice it to say, Excellencies, that yesterday the Prime Cabinet Secretary launched our new foreign policy. The 2024 foreign policy is an ambitious policy. We are still trying to look for a Christian name or a Muslim name for this policy, or a Kenyan name for this policy. But yesterday we called it our Twiga diplomacy. Why Twiga? I think we all know Twiga. We all know this majestic animal called the giraffe. Tall, beautiful, majestic. We think and we believe very much that this policy is foresighted, just like the giraffe sees over and above the rest of the animals. It's adaptive, it's agile, it's got majesty and dignity around it. That is the policy that we have set forward, for the Republic. And under the policy, Excellencies, dear colleagues, 8 focus areas have been elaborated, sort of a small departure from the 2014 policy that had what we call pillars. We thought the idea of pillars, while a good sort of metaphor, suggested sort of a rigidity, and it failed to appreciate the interactiveness of each of these pillars, because we had under the 2014 policy 5 pillars. And sometimes, while pursuing the peace pillar, often the idea is to aid our economic objectives. Sometimes you can use economic objectives to achieve the peace pillar, for example. And so, in the interest of being able to capture the actual position of how we do our business, we thought we just wanted to have focus areas. And so we have proposed 8 focus areas: peace and security diplomacy, economic and commercial diplomacy, multilateral and global governance diplomacy, environmental and climate diplomacy, oceans and blue economy diplomacy, diaspora diplomacy, socio-cultural diplomacy, science, tech, and innovation diplomacy. We believe that these areas will afford us a much broader terrain that will enable us advance the national interests of the Republic. And so this afternoon, it is really my hope that this forum will engage and give us ideas about how best we can be able to advance the economic focus of our diplomacy. I think with those few remarks, on behalf of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, I want to thank you most kindly for your taking the time to join us and to share your thoughts. Asanteni sana, and God bless you.
Yeah, thank you very much, PS. Another round of applause, please. So with that, I want to invite Steve Jackson, UN Resident Coordinator, to deliver his remarks. Steve, welcome.
Yes. So one of the great advantages of talking to a private sector or predominantly private sector audience is that you can cut down on the protocol. So riding on the protocols already established, let me just say, waheshimiwa viongozi wa biashara na marafiki, hamjambo. Great pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to give you some thoughts from the perspective of the United Nations on the contributions of the private sector, the necessary role of the private sector in the delivery of sustainable development, not just here in Kenya, but beyond. And I will start with a strong claim, but I stand by it. We cannot achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, here in Kenya or anywhere else around the world without the energies, the expertise, and the investment of the private sector. Let me justify that for you in what I hope will be about 5 or 7 minutes of remarks. So first of all, Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals constitute for me simply the most visionary plan yet for the betterment of the world and for the peoples of the world. It's an extraordinary document, and in this week where we indeed wish a happy 60th birthday to Kenyan diplomacy, it would be remiss of me not to salute Kenya's contribution to Agenda 2030, because as I'm sure all of you know, 2 countries co-facilitated the final negotiations on Agenda 2030 and got the rugby ball over the try line in the General Assembly in 2015. And those 2 countries were, by coincidence, Kenya, the country where I'm proudly serving, and Ireland, the country from which I proudly hail. So I always love that coincidence. But Agenda 2030 is not just visionary, it's also hugely, enormously ambitious. It seeks to transform the trajectory of the world. And since the global devastation wrought by COVID-19, all of the Sustainable Development Goals are essentially universally off track. There is no country anywhere on any of the continents that is on target to achieve all of the 17 SDGs by 2030. And in particular, the funding gap for achieving sustainable development is vast. It's estimated to be in the trillions of dollars that we need to mobilize if countries are going to make it to the finish line of 2030. Here in Kenya, friends, we know that traditional forms of official development assistance are drying up very fast. It was never very big to begin with, although very generously intended. But ODA, as we call it, traditional development assistance, was never going to be of the quantum needed to achieve the SDGs. In fact, it's off by multiple orders of magnitude. So where can we look, where must we look to find the financing at scale to deliver on the promise of the SDGs? How do we move from the old model of funding development to the 21st century model of financing development at scale? It has to come from private sector investment, domestic and international. And here, just to be absolutely clear, I mean profit-making investment, not corporate social responsibility, which is also orders of magnitude too small to make a difference. So our challenge, our collective challenge, is to devise opportunities for private sector actors to deliver simultaneously on what we refer to as the triple bottom line. Economic profit, which has to be there, otherwise you won't get the interest of a private sector actor, but social impact and environmental sustainability. So those three things together go into the triple bottom line. Now, to digress ever so slightly, this very room, a year and 2 months ago, hosted the Africa Climate Summit. And I strongly believe that the vision that I've just described for the SDGs was the vision that President Ruto brought to the Africa Climate Summit. You remember his argument. Many of us were here in this very room listening to him make it in September of last year. He said, if you want to solve the climate crisis, Africa has the solutions that you need, whether we're talking about the largest natural endowment of renewable energy resources, whether we're talking about the endowment of critical minerals to help you capitalize on those resources, whether we're talking about the largest remaining reserves of uncultivated arable land in the world, or whether you're talking about the second lung of the planet that Africa is, with the Congo rainforest, but Kenya's rangelands and the mangroves and so on for carbon capture. You need all four of those things to solve the climate crisis. Africa has them. Kenya has them. What do we need? Finance. Finance at scale. And so that's why the Africa Climate Summit was really a finance summit. Because what's holding us back is the cost of capital. It's not the absence of solutions. It's the investment. It's the fuel in the tank. It's the finance to bring the solutions to scale. And what we urgently need to do, and I know that the Kenyan business leaders in the audience know this deeply, is that we need to bring down the cost of capital. And so that's where the discussions about reform, urgent reform, to the international financial architecture, that's where those discussions become so key. And they reached a peak in September of this year at the Summit of the Future in New York on the margins of the General Assembly. And again, His Excellency President Ruto was a major force in those discussions. I like to say that my Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and His Excellency President Ruto are always on the same page. They are, but with a little bit of disloyalty to my own boss. I actually think President Ruto has it a little bit more right on this one, because my boss is very, very fixated on reforms to the World Bank and the IMF, and that rather formal institutional side of the development of the financial architecture. But President Ruto is thinking beyond that. He's thinking at scale, and he's thinking about the international private sector and the difficulties that it has in engaging in a country like Kenya because the cost of borrowing is so immense. So bringing down that cost of borrowing is really, really crucial. Here in Kenya, just to talk a little bit and briefly about what United Nations Kenya tries to do in this space. We, with the government of Kenya, have proudly, for some years now, been trying to pioneer bringing the private sector into the journey towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And we recently celebrated an anniversary of our own at the General Assembly in New York. We celebrated 10 years of the work of the UN-Kenya SDG Partnership Platform. It was formally launched by President Kenyatta all those years ago at the GA, and it works in 4 main ways. First of all, a lot of our work is on helping you, private sector actors in Kenya, to come together and really to enrich and reinforce the ecosystem through which public-private partnerships for the SDGs can emerge. So we've helped Kenya over the years shape its PPP policy guidelines. We've worked with hundreds of government and private sector reps across 23 counties working on public-private partnership. And we've helped to establish a number of very key sectoral private sector networks, the agriculture sector network, the finance, trade and investment network here in Kenya. The second way is to map new market opportunities. So just to give you one example of how that works, a number of years ago, we partnered with USAID and with McKinsey to do a market study of the profit-making opportunities in the delivery of primary health care in Kenya. Well, to everybody's mutual astonishment, the report came back and said, actually, there is a $6 billion, in other words, 800 billion Kenya shillings per annum, profit-making opportunity in the delivery of primary health care in Kenya. Those eye-watering sums of money got some attention. And very quickly after the publication of that report, private sector actors, both national and international, started to look with great interest. We have Royal Dutch Philips here working in the delivery of PHC in Makueni, and many others coming in. We have Huawei, I think, are in the audience working on telemedicine. So this was a trailblazing market study that identified an opportunity that needed to be tapped. The third way the SDG Partnership Platform works is through curating pipelines of investment-ready opportunities. So again, in the health sector, we've been able to identify and devise some $200 million worth, or about 26 billion Kenya shillings of bankable projects. And we've been able to identify similar pipelines of projects in green manufacture and other sectors. And we're working very hard, by the way, to inject some of this private sector DNA into the UN's own programming so we can partner better and scale up, whether that's in circular consumption in the green and blue economies, sustainable production for school feeding at scale, or in the sustainable management of Kenya's vital water reserves. This has all led us to partner with some of the biggest economic actors domestically and internationally. So here in Kenya, that includes, for example, my brother, Dr. James Mwangi and Equity Bank, the Equity Group Foundation, working with them across vital sectors like agriculture, health, education, or even the refugee docket. And internationally, we've struck a partnership with Sustainable Finance Geneva and their fabulous forum. There's only one thing wrong with that forum, and that's its name. It's called Building Bridges, but we'll pass swiftly on from that one. Coincidence. They're talking about building a bridge from Geneva to Nairobi. But that brings together very senior Swiss bankers, pension funds, who look to make profit-making investments for social impact and environmental sustainability in Kenya, Africa, and beyond. So let me finish now with one very concrete example, and one we're quite proud of where we've been able to work with and engage the private sector, both Kenyan and international, towards the delivery of a very specific SDG, and that's the SDG, again, on health. So in 2023, in collaboration with the Kenyan government, we were able to roll out what we think is the first, globally, the first development impact bond in the sensitive area of adolescent sexual and reproductive health. And it's very appropriate, I think, that I would highlight this example while we're in the middle of the 16 days of activism right now, combating gender-based violence. So what this development impact bond does is it puts in place results-based financing to drive the delivery of high-quality and scalable sexual and reproductive health services for adolescent girls in Kenya, particularly those from the most vulnerable communities who experience significant challenges related to pregnancy, related to new HIV infections. So they get to use an app. They download it on their phone. That provides them in real time with critical information and, as needed, access to sexual and reproductive health services. It's currently supporting nearly 500,000 adolescent girls. And the brilliance of it is that the app isn't just a one-way vehicle. So it provides them the services and the information, but then they get to review it. So it's a bit like Uber. You give it 1, 2, 3 to 5 stars. If you're satisfied, you give 5 stars. The private sector investors only get a return on their money if they keep the performance up. And so there's a beautiful feedback loop, And with it, we've been able to crowd in more investment, starting with $12 million to begin with, and now rising to 20 million. And there's a new round of investors looking to come in the second phase, where we hope to go to beyond 1 million girls accessing these services. To conclude then, PS and colleagues, the theme for today's deliberations is Kenya's private sector in advancing Kenya's diplomatic agenda. Well, the first submission I would make is the obvious one, that the SDGs are part of the heart of Kenya's diplomatic agenda, for Kenya, but for the world. The second is that the world has a very great deal to learn from the success of Kenya's private sector. I've been astonished, and my sister Carol has heard me say this on many occasions, I have never come across a private sector anywhere in the world that is so on message and on brand about sustainable development and the SDGs. I'm embarrassed, I've forgotten to wear my SDG pin today, but I bet there are private sector actors in the audience who are wearing one. So there's much that the world has to learn for how laser-focused Kenya is, and the Kenyan private sector is, on the opportunity to make profit in a way that is pro-sustainable development, environmentally sensitive, and achieves impact. And so, PS, I would join with you. The Kenyan private sector can be proud ambassadors for Kenya's message abroad. We already have Kenyan private sector expanding in the sub-region, buying up companies and banks in the DR Congo, and thereby exerting a soft power of Kenya in the broader sub-region. But we're going to see that happening internationally as well. And I really think, therefore, that it was an act of genius, PS, if I can say so, to convene a private sector discussion about this triangle between Kenya's national interests, sustainable development, and diplomacy. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, Jackson, for those remarks. They are very insightful, and we appreciate very much. So with that, we conclude this opening segment, and now we move to the next part of the program, which is the panel discussions. And we start with the first panel, which is going to be around the role of private sector in advancing Kenya's economic diplomatic agenda. And I'll be inviting Carol Kariuki, CEO. KICC will be moderating that panel to come in front. And also, I want to invite the panelists who have come on this as well to come in front, please. Yes, please. I saw Stephen Odua. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Adams Belle, UBA. Adams Belle, UBA. Thank you. So, Carol, over to you.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I don't know where my other two panelists are, but if they find us going, we will go. But if they don't find, I think I do have enough here to take us through this short panel. But let me allow them first to introduce themselves and which organizations they represent, and then we'll take it from here. I have a bit of a cold, so if my voice seems to be a bit shaky, it's a cold.
Yes, thank you very much. Congratulations to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on 60 years. My name is James Moria. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Centum PLC, and we are close friends of both the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Alfred Kombudo's department in the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry.
Good afternoon. Let me recognize our PSs, PS Alfred Kombudo and PS Korir for Foreign Affairs. Of course, let me ride on the existing protocols. My name is Stephen Odua, representing the PS for Investment Promotion, Abubakar Hassan Abubakar. I'm the Director in charge of Business Environment and Private Sector Development in the State Department of Investment Promotion. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, all protocol observed. My name is Athanas Mbele from UBA Kenya. I'm here to represent the MD and the CEO of UBA Bank Kenya, and I'm happy to be part of this panel discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll take it, and I think I'll change the model a bit so that we have a bit of engagement with everyone here. So we'll do a few minutes with the panel. Then I'll also engage you who are seated here just on a few of the questions so that at least we have a real good engagement with everyone that is here. But taking it back from where my good friend Stephen Jackson left it, about the private sector, and it's true. I think for me, as I travel around the world and I see how private sector operates, I cannot stop being amazed at the private sector in Kenya. And there are many things we can do, but I think the one thing that we've done well is always to see where there are gaps and to come in and step in. You know, economically, we know government, we are the engine of economic growth, and we don't expect government to really be the one driving the economy. It is us, the private sector. But we ask government for an enabling environment. And then we look at the social impact, you know, whether it's education, whether it's health, and we realize that government cannot carry the burden. And that's when the private sector has always come in very strongly. Then the environment, the whole area about climate change has been a big agenda, you know, and government started discussing this on a regular basis, but private sector came in very strong and started saying, we're here, you know, not only to offer our finance, but to offer our capabilities and to be part of these conversations. And so you can see the change that the private sector has had. And in countries like Kenya and many others, the private sector is not only limited even to those three, it's even on peace and security. You know, we've seen big campaigns that we've run, even at KICC, on peaceful elections and transitions. It's because we know as private sector that we're a partner to government in terms of development, and we take that role very seriously. And so to my panelists this afternoon, and I know we also have government representation here and the area of business environment. But let me begin by just talking about when we look back in where the world came from, a lot of diplomacy was very politically driven. You know, countries were looking at owning regions. You know, that's when we had colonialism and all that. But at the back of that, there was always the economy. But today, we look at the world and we see countries are really big focused on where are the investments. And so their diplomacy is very economic driven. Where are the investments? And how could we get, how can we grow as a country by going outside into the rest of the world? And I think that's what we've seen. Every time we've seen presidents come into this country and or our president going out, we're looking for markets, we're looking for investments, more than just political relations. And so to you, James, when all that has been happening, and you can give examples from Centum as you answer this, from a business perspective, and should Kenya's approach economic diplomacy internally and on goods and services, what policies and regulations do you see that need to be in place by government for the private sector, our own private sector, as it's looking at investments where government is leading us in terms of markets? And how can we drive that conversation more from a business perspective? Because government will go where the private sector wants to go. You know, if private sector is not interested in some country X, it becomes very hard for government. So what are the policy and regulations that should be in place for economic diplomacy to work as it should?
No, thank you very much, Caro. So let me build up on where PS Korir Sing'oei left around the 8 focus areas. Projection of national power, the foundation is economic. If you don't have the economic base, you cannot project your will on others. And the economic base of a country is driven by its private sector. So the private sector and government are symbiotic. They are twins. The role of government is to come up with policies that enable the development of its private sector, to enable us to expand our markets, to enable us to have real economic transformation. Some of the areas I think we can do better is just the structure of our economy. It has remained largely reliant on primary products. Now we have an opportunity, and I'm happy to see Alfred seated next to PS Korir, and I engage Alfred a lot. For example, when we are negotiating a trade agreement with the United States, why can't we go into EV vehicles? Why can't we go into new areas so that you really transform the structure of this economy to enable us attract investors into those areas? Because the key thing around attracting investments is around market access. And if you think about the Kenyan market, it's still too small for us to scale. The African market is too small for us to scale. We need to access larger markets, the EU market, the US market. And Kenya is carrying a heavy responsibility of peace and security in this region. We are carrying a heavy responsibility of containing the flow of immigrants to other parts of the world. To contain it, it is critical we expand the productive capacity of our economy. To expand this productive capacity, this is intricately linked with foreign policy. So we're not just discussing small things, small and micro enterprises. We need to be able to generate big businesses. This morning I was speaking to one of the advisors in government, and they told me Kenya's foreign debt is $50 billion. It might appear big, but the country where Stephen Jackson comes from, Ireland, which has a population of about 6-7 million people, last year collected 25 billion euros on corporation tax. So corporation tax is 25 billion, which is 2 years of our cover. We are at 2 billion. The reason they're 25 and we're at 2 is because our corporations are small. And the challenges the thing they have sorted out is market access. So I think that is one area where we can significantly collaborate so that we expand the size of our private sector. We expand the number of people who are in employment. Today you have about 3 million people who are contributing to pay as you earn out of a population of 20 million people. We need to expand that. So there's room for us to act collaboratively. But even as we speak of that, I think there's also room for us to be more engaged as government engages in various trade agreements. Because we understand how we can move the economy forward. And when you meet a lot of these delegations, they also have their private sector with them. But sometimes when these trade agreements are negotiated, the private sector is not even aware what was negotiated, what is there, and therefore how they can take advantage of it. So we've done a few things now to come to the micro level, because even as you promote, I'm speaking to private sector people here, the 4 forces, when you do marketing, you need to have a product, you then promote the product, and then you have the regulations. So you cannot promote without a product. And so our role is to have the product for you to sell. So we've done a number of things. One is leverage the special economic zone framework so that we create a hub for services, which is what we've done with Two Rivers International Finance and Innovation Center. We've done something similar for industries, which hopefully will be gazetted soon in Vipingo. We've attracted significant investment into that, significant infrastructure in that. What we now need is to be able to inform international investors that you can set up here and access the US market very much the way somebody in Mexico can access, and then we'll be able to attract multi-billion shilling industries into this country. So that's why I'm very much excited about this forum. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me do a follow-up question on that. On you, James, you've talked about how you've attracted investors into the country because of our own economic diplomacy into different countries. But at Centum, are you looking at outside markets, and what informs you, in where you're looking at? Is it where government is leading us, or are you in those conversations on where government should be looking at, and what are those countries and the reasons behind it?
Yeah, so we are looking at a number of markets, and the biggest market is that is been overlooked for a long time is a market in services. And if you think about Africa, we have an advantage in that we have a very large population of young people, and other countries don't have. And in many European countries, and the US, you have now the rise of right-wing governments. In fact, there's one country I saw, I think Lithuania, where now they have an extreme right and a center right who are competing for in the runoff. And all these countries, they are anti-immigration. And when you go to sell, you sell to solve the problem of your partners. And one area we can solve for the rest of the world is this issue of immigration. If those entities that are labor intensive can come and set up in places like Kenya, and instead of Africa exporting human beings, we export services and goods. That is one area we think there's a significant opportunity, so that then you can also broaden your tax base. And also some policies we can speak about is also relaxation of work permits. Because I think Kenya has a potential to be a global hub for services. And we have an opportunity to import taxpayers. Instead of taxing the taxpayers, we have more. Dr. Korir, we can bring other peoples to be taxpayers in this country and make it easy for them to operate here and serve in other regions. So for example, in Triffic, we've been able to attract a business process sourcing company. Actually, we started with the largest in the world. And it's initially going to employ 5,000 people. But they employ 100,000 in the Philippines. So the question is, what can we do to expand that number? What policies need to be put in place to make Kenya more attractive as a global processing hub for services? Not just basic services like call center, even sophisticated services in finance, legal, financial services, issues around data protection, etc. So those are some of the specific things that we have done. But I still see this scope for us to do significantly more. I think in short, Carol, where I'm going to, it is time for us to start thinking big. To stop, to think beyond Kenya and East Africa, to see how can Kenya play a role in the world, and how can we use our position in the world to be a global actor, so that we expand our tax base here, so that we can be more effective also in dealing with regional issues and SDGs, etc.
Thank you. I think the person I would have wanted in this conversation as I go to trade is foreign affairs. And the reason is, many times, and being part of these conversations out there, we market Kenya, as a destination. Our economic diplomacy is all about the economy and the investments and all that. But many times from where I sit, when we get back, the investors come, and they come in droves from all over the world, but they get stuck. And if we look at how much time and resources we spend talking to investors out there, and how much investment that turns to becomes a reality, does not match. And so my question, and then I'll go to foreign affairs when I open it up on the same question, is to trade. And this is where the investors stop, the business environment. And the question is, why doesn't all those conversations and the excitement and full rooms of investors turn to investments when they come here? Why do they go back and say the business environment is not conducive? What is the issue, and what can we do differently so that those investors stay and they don't move to other countries? Or even what we are seeing right now, we are having quite a bit of our investors moving into the region. Who talked about Tanzania 10 years ago? But Tanzania today is a real game changer in this region, and something has changed, either with them or with us. And so to you, Ministry of Trade, as you look at the business environment, what are those things that investors keep looking for, but we are not providing, and what could we do differently, so that even as we go out to get investors as part of our economic diplomacy, then they turn to investments?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Carol. Indeed, as has already been mentioned earlier, the private sector is the engine of economic growth. And as government, then our key role is to see how we can facilitate the private sector to be able to play that role. And in particular, for the State Department of Investment Promotion, we look at how we could provide an enabling environment to promote the investments, like you say. I think a lot of that has been done. but also to support them in terms of landing. And one of our key roles here is how can we improve or enhance the investor journey, or Kenya's investor journey into our economy. So I think one of the key challenges we have been experiencing is one in terms of adequate workspace or adequate space for investors to be able to plug and play. As we operate within a very competitive global environment, a lot of investors would want to come and get a ready place to be able to just start, and especially for those in the manufacturing sector, a good world-class workspace or warehouse with good infrastructure to be able then to set up. Now, to be able to provide that, we have come up with the export processing zones scheme, and of particular interest, the special economic zones scheme, which will then be able to help in facilitating or providing that world-class infrastructure for businesses then to be able to plug and play. Besides just providing that environment, another key challenge they are having is the cost of doing business. How can we reduce the cost of doing business? And for us, particularly in the ESC region, one of the issues that come out is perhaps the high cost of energy. So with that, we have provided incentives, both in terms of reducing the cost of electricity for those who are operating within the special economic zones. I think for us, we have been lucky enough that a lot of the special economic zones now, we have actually been able to license 38 of them are mainly private sector driven. Very few public, as it were, but mainly private sector driven. So that then fast tracks the availability of those zones. We are trying to work on how we could reduce the cost of electricity within those zones. And the special economic zones also have incentives that make it more attractive for the investors then to land and operate. But besides that, besides the special economic zones, we are also working, and thank you, Caro, through KEPSA and other private sector organizations. We've been working together, and especially in the State Department of Investment Promotion, to see how we can address the pain points that existing investors are actually having to be able to improve the business environment. And we believe through those initiatives, already we have a business laws amendment bill as one of the steps of implementing some of the issues that we have raised or has been raised by the private sector in improving the business environment. We'll be able then to address that, including some other administrative, policy, and legal issues to improve our business environment. Yes, indeed, we are now operating in one global village, and as much as we have opened up markets through agreements for preferential market access, we still have room, or we still have more to do in terms of enhancing value addition, and that's where now probably, and enhancing the goods that you can trade within the region. So that's something we are working closely with the private sector to see how we can enhance. And we see how then we could not only just attract, but also train investors within this economy. Thank you.
Let me do a follow-up question on that. One of the other challenges that we find, especially with Africa, as we do this economic diplomacy, and this is something that has stemmed over years, as we look back over 60 years during the colonial times, was yes, would bring the investors in, but the problem would be the resources are here, and then would sell off as raw materials. So they would never benefit the country as they should. And so as we look at our modern economic diplomacy, what are the policies and regulations have we put in place to ensure that the investors who come in here, as Moria said, in terms of as we look at even our taxation and all that, the resources are produced processed here to create the jobs, but also to the revenue, and also to ensure that, even as we've been crying about taxes, so that it also lessens the burden for Kenyans. Are there policies in place to ensure that, or are we still going to see our iron ore, our copper, our coffee leaving the country in bulk and coming back as finished goods, and all the jobs are exported out there, and then we get Kenyans to leave the country because the jobs are out there and not in the country? So what are you doing, especially in the Ministry of Trade, to push and to work with Foreign Affairs to ensure, as we are doing this economic diplomacy, that the right policies and regulations are in place so that we are not operating 70, 60 years ago, the way we operated with economic diplomacy and brought in investors?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that question. Indeed, we have seen economic diplomacy also changing in the field of how we could have what we are now calling friendly onshoring or offshoring, on the cases of those investors coming in from different countries to set up in Kenya, to be able then to not only just set up and add value in terms of the products. A bit of the biggest challenge we have been having, especially with regard to value-added products, what we would refer to as non-tariff barriers. These would be issues to deal with, to be such as standards that some of our partners would then be able to put, which will then, as much as we have the market access, but when it comes to value addition, we have a challenge of accessing that market. And through economic diplomacy and engagements and also negotiations, we have been able to address those issues of non-tariff barriers. We've been able to agree and set up on issues of standards, which will then enable our products, especially value-added products, to go into a lot of the developed export markets. We have also been looking at, especially within the special economic zones and the export processing zones, how then we could be able to enhance local value addition by virtue of once you actually are producing, or you could demonstrate that your product is actually certifying the rule of origin based on the local content that you're producing on, then you also have preferential markets within the global domestic market, which is the ESC market, and now with preferential treatment within the Africa continent, through the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, and also now with discussions within the EU EPA, and also our discussions with the Middle East. So yes, we are trying to address issues of standards that are a big challenge initially, and non-tariff barriers through economic diplomacy. And then we, again, enhance the promotion of value-added products within the global environment.
I want to add something.
Okay.
To that point. I can't just resist. Alfred can go and negotiate the best market access. You can also have the raw materials. But under the WTO rules, raw materials will flow where they can be processed at the least cost. You cannot force people to process here if it's expensive to add value in your country. And one thing we need to realize as Kenyans is that investors have choices on where to invest, where to do business, where to process their raw materials. You cannot force them by legislation. So it's our responsibility to do a benchmarking to say what is the cost of processing raw materials to finished goods in Kenya vis-a-vis Vietnam, vis-a-vis the countries we are competing with. For a long time, we've used the wrong benchmarks. We just compete with our neighbors. Now, there's a mismatch between the benchmarking with our neighbors and the markets that we're negotiating access to. So you're negotiating an access for EPA. What are you going to sell them in that EPA? And are you able to get raw materials from Congo and convince a manufacturer to relocate their factory from China to Kenya because it's the lowest cost place to do business? Unless we do that, then it will not work. You can do all these trade agreements, and we must all accept what is the issue. The issue, in my view, is that our productive capacity has been artificially limited, constrained by our own policies and ways of doing business. So we need to look at the cost. We need to look at the predictability of policy. When people invest, we have a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year view. You can't invest if policy changes every 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. It's not possible. No one will be able to do anything long-term. You're going to be a trading entity. Some of the regulations that we have brought in place, I think sometimes they are brought in by our competitors to make us simply uncompetitive. So you attend a forum somewhere, you're told all these nice regulations, you import them wholesale. But I think also the lack of domestic think tanks, where people can sit as nationals of a country and say what is best for us and what policies will make us competitive to be able to convince other people to come and set up here, bring raw materials from the rest of Africa and export them to the rest of the world. That's the only time we'll be able to now get the benefits of all these things that we are working on. Thank you.
Thank you. You've answered that question very well. Actually, I think that's what I really wanted to drive to. If we don't sort out our drivers of competitiveness, which is the 5 drivers of competitiveness, then we can do all economic diplomacy we want, but the investors will keep coming and leaving, or watching us from a distance and liking our product, but never coming. And so that's the real niche where I think Ministry of Trade and Foreign Affairs need to have a mind to sit down, plus ourselves who are there in the private sector, and look at those drivers of competitiveness and address each one of them, and then we will be able to do it. I know because of the interest of time, I have to ask UBA this. UBA, you're one of the investors into the country, and you're in many other countries in Africa. Just give us at least 3 big things that was very attractive for you to come to Kenya and not go to country X in Africa, so that we could also be picking some of those things and doing them more for other investors to be able to come into the country.
Thank you. UBA, we call ourselves an African global bank. We are present in 20 African countries. We bring a very unique conversation into enabling, because when you talk about economic diplomacy, the World Bank report talks about removal of trade barriers and all that, contributing to a growth of income to 0.2%. But majorly for us to be able to grow the MSMEs especially, and that's our focus as UBA Bank, is to be able to really act on the word that I've heard repeatedly, enabling. Kenya attracted us because of the capacity of the MSMEs that are there, but more importantly by our global vision. I started by saying we are in 20 African countries, and we summarize our financial enabling into saying that we have one account to 20 African countries. We want to be able to enable a Kenyan business think beyond the borders. We have partnered with AFTA, that is African Free Continental Trade Area. And our partnership is not just on removing the red tapes. It's acting on the enabling, and this is enabling on financial. We've set aside $6 billion across the African continent to be able to finance the MSME. In Kenya, we've done, we've set aside $285 million, and we've just made a product that is tailor-made for Kenyan business to move across Africa. But for us to be able to grow Africa, and my colleague has talked about the huge market potential in Africa, we also have to ask ourselves, how do we enable African businesses, a Kenyan business, trade in global markets that are outside the continent of Africa? So we decided to set up offices. We are the only African bank that is fully licensed to operate in the US. We also are operating in Europe. We are in France, London. We just opened Dubai as well strategically, and we are now opening in Saudi Arabia. And all that is to enable the businesses being able to trade. But we have not just stopped on financial enabling. We also want to enable market. And we have launched a very unique initiative called Trade Connect. And we've partnered with Kenya Chambers and other private sectors. And we've also partnered with Afri-Exim Bank, one of the top trade banks in Africa, to be able to open up a marketplace for African businesses. And capacity build, we are working also with IFC very closely so that Kenyan businesses are able to not just sell in African continents that we are present, but they are able to see and easily access those markets. We recently launched a consignment of over 1,000 trailers with a company that is called Real Sources Africa. And what we are doing with that, we have opened a marketplace for logistically enabling. So as we are enabling financially, we're also enabling businesses to logistically move across the continent.
Okay. Thank you. I know we needed to have this conversation more, and I know I'm out of time. And as I hand over the microphone back to Ambassador Masila, I have to ask this question to the PS Foreign Affairs. And my question is, it's December. We're going into 2025. And we're going into 2025 in the light of still two wars that are going on. We still have Israel-Hamas. We still have the Ukraine war. We have an aggressive BRICS that is really competing with the US, and I think we've seen what President Trump has said. And there's President Trump also in the US. How do you see business preparing itself in Kenya in this exciting world and to take advantage of still the investments and the global and the economic diplomacy, so that, because in times of crisis, there's always winners and losers. And Kenya needs to be among the winners. So in all that exciting space and many other things that are happening globally, how should we in the business be prepared to make sure that we are growing our investments, and as a country, we are attracting more investors and growing our country in that environment? I know it's a big question, it has many answers, but in a minute, as Ambassador Masila comes up.
Well, thank you very much, Carol, and thank you to all the panelists for, their very concise and very well thought through responses. I think it's fair to say that we live in a very complex and dynamic geopolitical environment. There are serious risks that impede business, impede the movement of goods and services. I think the wars that you mentioned have, for example, disrupted major global value chains. I think you know about the impact of the Ukrainian-Russian war, particularly in terms of the Black Sea access route. I think we are now seeing very clearly the impact of the Palestinian-Israeli war on these Suez and the Hormuz sort of strait. Again, a very, very important trade route. And the point really is that it's increasing the cost of goods, which are then passed on to our consumers and to our citizens. And therefore, that's why I think Kenya is very much invested in this whole idea of saying, look, we've got to find resolution to these conflicts. A big conflict within our neighborhood, say in Sudan, has taken away a major market for our tea, for example. Sudan exports, I think it's the second largest exporter of black teas, for example. And so there is a huge cost on business associated with conflicts within the region and beyond the region, and we must continue to work around these issues. But there are also opportunities around some of these issues, because indeed, because of some of these conflicts, we can also make the case as to why some of those businesses that are producing in those more riskier jurisdictions ought to relocate, to places such as Kenya and to East Africa, that are relatively peaceful and are also pretty much better linked. I think additionally, the issue around President Trump's coming into power is an important one. We see huge opportunities, and I think James has alluded to that. And I've been asked this question in the context of our presence, of the presence of our deployment in Haiti, where many people are like, what are you doing in Haiti? And yet President Trump is anti-immigration. And I argue that precisely that there is an alignment, actually, between our being in Haiti and what President Trump is proposing, which is that you deal with immigration by ensuring that there are conditions that basically facilitate people within their home countries to be able to produce goods and services, and to be able to grow their economy. So there are no incentives really for migrating. I think in a similar fashion, one can argue that even with regard to the movement of labor from a jurisdiction such as ours, it doesn't need to move. If in fact we can demonstrate that we have all these capabilities, we have an enabling environment, we have a youthful, well-educated, very skilled population, we can still be able to create value here in Kenya if we are able to address the bottlenecks, the bureaucracy, and the constraints. And I think the point that has been emphasized from this panel is that we need to look at the entire ecosystem and ask ourselves the difficult questions around, why are we not doing as well as we ought, given the capacity and the capability that we have, both as government and within our private sector. And that's the issue that we need to address as we head into 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone, to my panelists. Thank you for doing a good job in the limited time. I had many more questions for Stephen Jackson and others, but for another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Caro, and the panelists. That was quite good. And next time we'll have like 1 hour for that particular panel. So to thank the panelists and the moderator for that. So with that, I want also to recognize as they take the photographs, the presence of, or the arrival of the PS State Department for MSMEs, Susan Mangeni. PS, welcome. So as that photograph takes place, I want to invite the next panel, led by James Kitavi, who is going to be the moderator for that panel. Kindly come in front. And then we'll have Dr. Eric Ruto, President of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce. We have, of course, PS, State Department for MSMEs. We have Fatuma Bashir, representing the chairman of KEPROPA as well as KEPSA. And then, of course, we have Joyce and Ajir. Please, come in front. So, Kitavi, the floor is yours. 30 minutes. Then we conclude this panel. Thank you and welcome.
Good afternoon and thank you very much. I would like to. Okay. I would like to invite my panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Madam PS.
Good afternoon. You have already introduced me. My name is Susan Mangeni. I'm the PS for the State Department for Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises Development.
Thank you very much, James, and the organizers for this forum, Minister of Foreign Affairs. I'm Dr. Ruto Eric, the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry President, where we do represent over 50,000 companies, and by association over 2 million micro businesses, and 47 chapters of the chamber, which I chair the National Federation of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Good afternoon. My name is Hajir Malim. I'm the Regional Director for Norwegian Refugee Council covering East and Southern Africa region. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Joyce Njoku, Head of Consulting at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers.
Good afternoon. My name is Fatma Bashir, Stakeholder Engagement Director and the Resource Mobilization Director at Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To put this conversation into perspective, we all know that the micro and small enterprise play an important role in Kenya's economic development, contributing to job creation, business innovation, and country's GDP. It is estimated that Kenya is home to over 7.4 million micro and small enterprises, which employ about 14.9 million people and contribute to about 40% of Kenya's GDP. Madam PS, the first question is to you. The government has put in place various policies and infrastructure, like the Hustler Fund. To which extent would you briefly tell the audience, has this particular fund achieved its objectives? Briefly.
Well, I don't know how to be brief when it comes to Hustler Fund, but probably I will try. But before that, let me try to connect the theme of this gathering, which is economic diplomacy vis-a-vis MSME. And maybe the question will be, why MSME? Why MSME? MSME is very critical in this conversation that we are having in our diplomatic space, because the most significant bilateral engagement or diplomacy that you can have is trade. Because when it comes to trading, there is exchange of values. So there is almost equal partnership. You look at each other, each party as being equal because there is a value that is being exchanged. That's why then trading becomes a bit more important and more pronounced in terms of our diplomatic ties. But then coming to MSME, I really am trying to avoid to answer that because I will take 2 hours. I want to, maybe I'll come to it later, because those are some of the interventions which you are doing to unlock the capabilities of the MSME sector in this country, which you have ably alluded to it. But also, let me say, what are we looking at? Why MSME? MSME because those statistics which you have given, 90% of it are micro entrepreneur. So when we talk about micro entrepreneurs in that space, it means even those jobs which are being created are from enterprises which are probably being run by one person. I want to compare ourselves to other economies, which we can say we are almost at the same age. And in this case, allow me to use, for example, South Korea, which are almost the same age when it comes to economy. Where they are today is that they have over 500,000 enterprises that can at least create 5 jobs and above. Where we sit today, we are at about 75,000. Almost the same age, almost same population, but you can look at the difference in terms of the number of enterprises that they have, which have got capacity to create jobs, generate more revenue into the economy. So we are placing a lot of renewed focus on this sector because these are our traders. These are the people who go outside there, take advantage of the export opportunities. So we just want the gathering here to appreciate that anytime, especially our diplomats, when you're outside there, the people you need to have in mind are our micro entrepreneur, because we are a micro economy, our traders are micro, their ability is also micro, our purchasing power in our economy is micro, so all our conversation, we need to confine it within that space. But I'll come to talk about those other interventions because I'm sure that question you're asking will take us an hour to respond. However, we've had significant success to that. Today, as we speak, we have close to 2 million Kenyans whom we have rehabilitated and now are at a point where they can be piped into our economy, can be supported, linked up to enhance financial opportunities, exist within a supportive business ecosystem. These are the people whom we want to take up opportunities in the global value chain and form companies, venture into the manufacturing sector, and help us to create jobs. But we'll talk about those numbers later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is to the Chamber President. As the government puts in place policies to support micro and small enterprises, kindly elaborate the role of the private sector in amplifying government's agenda in supporting SMEs to venture into value addition and helping them into the export market.
Thank you very much, James. And maybe before I start, I'll give a little bit of a preamble. In our database of Kenya National Chamber of Commerce, we have approximately 600 companies that do export trade. Out of these 600 companies, around 10% account for 80% of the Kenya's exports. And as I was looking at these exports across what we do, is that you will count 1 to 5, and after 5, it will be very difficult for you to count what Kenya's, in terms of being competitive in terms of exports. If you pick on tea, pick on coffee, there is cut flowers, there is textile, and closing that chapter is titanium. Looking at it is that we are celebrating today 60 years since we did our international economic diplomacy, but those products were developed way far before 60 years. I was told that we started exporting our tea, which is our #1 export, from 1937. So therefore, it means we've not done very well in terms of, one, making the SMEs to be competitive in terms of creating other alternative products for purposes of export. So as the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce, our role definitely is to collect the business intelligence information. We have approximately 250 MOUs we've signed. We are affiliated to 177 chambers of commerce globally. We get a lot of business intelligence on the products that the outside market or the global market requires. But the problem we have is the capacity of SMEs. Now, if you have to pick of the 600, the 540, those are the ones which could grow our Kenya's exports and diversify over 1,000%, 2,000%, or even 10,000%. So what have we done? Recently, we have 2 programs, and you had UBA, the Trade Connect, for us to be able to export 1,000 containers under SCFTA. So what we did for the company that was mentioned earlier, who is a patron member, is we did finance business development consultants to 3 countries. That was South Sudan in Juba, Zambia, and DRC Congo. And out of that, we were able to get in signed orders of approximately $2 million. When we came back to Kenya, we were able to get 1.3 million goods that we were able to aggregate. And we did launch 1 month ago, $1.3 million worth of goods to these 3 countries. So and these were majorly the small manufacturers, the small processors, which we partner with Kenya Association of Manufacturers. So that is what we are doing. Currently, we are having this program in the counties, and I'm very happy that the PS for Trade is here. We are doing the economic partnership agreement sensitization, the roadshows, and across the counties, we have the 47 chapters, and we are training these small and medium enterprises for them to be able to participate directly or even indirectly in terms of supplying the raw materials to the companies which are exporting. As I talk, last week, we were in Busia training. This week on Friday, we shall be in Kirinyaga. So we are going to the grassroots to be able to train the business, especially on what the market requires, because international market requires, one, it has to be consistent, it has to be the right standard, and of the right quality, and of the right price. So that is what we are training these SMEs across the board. One of the other things that we do have as a big challenge is, of course, access to finance. And for us to be able to be very competitive, the cost of credit has to come down. One example is we have a textile factory, the cost of power, and I'm very happy that the Trade Secretary talked about power. We did a survey and we found out that of the 5 East African Economic Bloc countries, that is Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, we were scoring 5 out of 5 on the cost of diesel to the final customer. And even in terms of power, we were scoring 5 out of 5. And I think that's why we are not able to attract that kind of companies to come and process here. So definitely we do lobby a lot to see how government can be able to bring these costs down so that we can become competitive as a country for us to produce for the global market. The other aspect that we do is, under our international diplomacy, is for because technology you can buy. So we connect SMEs to the right technology, the right equipment for them to be able to process or even to buy material to do value addition so that they can re-export to these markets. It pains me a lot that government has done a lot to negotiate economic partnership agreements, and I really want to commend the Ministry of Trade and this government for negotiating economic partnership agreement with the European Union. It has been there for the last, I think, 8 years, and I think within 9 months you're able to sign it. And I think that one has really contributed to us having surety for us to access the European market for the next 24 years, quota-free and duty-free. But it pains me a lot when we now go internationally to come and tell these investors to come and do very basic things like tailoring, making clothes, for them to come and invest in Kenya to re-export to those regions. So what we are doing is that we are building capacity of the SMEs in terms of what the market requires, where the source of the raw materials, what is the quality that is required, which equipment is required for you, and then after that now we aggregate these products so that you can be able to get quantities that are of exportable value or even quantities for purposes of export. And then finally, we've also opened satellite offices. We did, for the last 1 year, we've opened an office in China, and we've been able to export goods worth 390 million Kenya shillings, or approximately $3 million US. And if you have to look at what we export to China, that's around 1%. If you have to remove titanium alone, that comes to 10%. So within a year, our office has been able to increase the exports to that region. With that success, we've opened another satellite office in Dubai, another one in Washington, DC, and recently we did open an office in Russia for us to be able to connect now the SMEs directly to the international market, either to attract investments or even to market our goods and even protect our market globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chamber President. Allow me to jump Mr. Malim and ask this question as a follow-up questions to the panelists from Kenyan Association of Manufacturers. Do you think our SMEs are able to produce products that are competitive, both locally, within the region and internationally? And if not, what can we do to support SMEs to be competitive?
Yes, I confirm SMEs can actually produce competitive products, and they actually are. Many SMEs are very innovative, and they have very high quality products. And one of the challenges, of course, is producing at scale, and mainly because of not being able to afford to buy the right technologies, and also it's not supported by access to a market that then can help them, either guarantee them so that they can access financing for that. But from what we've been doing at KICC in exposing SMEs to showcase what they have, we confirm that really a lot of SMEs have good products. Some of their products I buy, and people keep asking me, where did you buy these or the other, especially like leather products, like handbags, clothes, accessories, and such. And most of them are also able, those who have very high quality products are able to access international markets comfortably. And one of the things as KICC we've done first is to restructure how we approach SMEs. So we have a manufacturing SME hub, and in that hub we look at 3 areas. Policy advocacy, we give them an opportunity to air their issues, and then we're able to consolidate all the policies that are supportive of SME and look at the impact that they have, whether progressive or regressive. The other area that we are driving is business development services, advisory services. Like you've heard from chambers and others, that's a big area of growth for SMEs. And lastly, just giving them a platform to integrate into sectors and regions where they can participate in sector groups. Because at KICC we look at sector integration, especially along supply chains, where there are clusters and they can be able to be integrated. One of the areas that we've seen can work and is working is and I wanted to make reference to what James Moria said, attracting big businesses. At KICC we have big businesses that are really driving SME integration, supporting them to integrate into their supply chains. And they drive numbers upstream and downstream, whether it's from the farmer groups. You'll find even a medium company supporting 50,000 farmers to supply them with raw materials here in Kenya. They have distributors who are supporting them. They have transporters in the system, transporting, all of them being SMEs. So looking at that entrepreneurial culture and the ecosystem of making sure there's one big company that's struggling with the market, looking for the markets, they get guaranteed markets globally, and then integrating into the supply chain. We've seen that also working in textile sector. We've seen that working in automotive sector. Even here in Kenya, where there's a lot of component manufacturing, and then the big companies are able to then access those markets. But where the SMEs are working directly for themselves to access markets, we're also supporting them to access affordable and high-quality financing, because currently a lot of them get very high-cost finance. It's not of good quality. They're really harassed in how then they pay back those financing. So the cost is high. And part of the opportunities that have been brought up by government is the credit guarantee schemes, but also we use supplier networks to offer that guarantee to SMEs so that you supply a company that then guarantees you and then pays you. But just also advocating for policies that have been stuck, like prompt payment bill. SMEs are stuck with cash flows. When they sell their few products and they are not paid, they can actually crash. So the prompt payment bill has been delayed, and if you go to developed countries, those prompt payment acts are very vibrant in ensuring that SMEs are paid on time, hence they're able to work on their capital flows and then invest appropriately in how then they can continue supplying the markets. The other bill, of course, we are looking at is not really a bill. Of course, startup bill, I know PS is capturing those. The startup bill is also supposed to really inspire an entrepreneurial culture in this country, and it's still stuck somewhere. But we're also proud of the preferential master role, procurement master role that is there. We're able to, again, showcase what is available locally, what is made locally. And together with KRA, assess how much is imported that can really be produced locally and attract SMEs to invest in those areas. SMEs are agile. They don't have long processes of protocol, so they can easily innovate and do what they need to do. But the gap there, again, is in R&D. So we are also employing on investors to come and really invest in R&D and share some of the sectoral approaches. Because some R&D are company-specific, but for SMEs, they benefit better on sectoral R&D. So that we say in this sector, these are the opportunities. And at KICC, we've done a deep dive across 13 sectors just to show where opportunities for investments are. And we welcome participants, those who are interested in seeing where investments are in terms of, let's say, pharmaceutical sector, which is also growing because of the health crisis that is there in the world, education, and all that. So in manufacturing, we pride in ourselves in touching all angles of the economy in the way that then we support innovations. If it's affordable housing, again, getting guarantees from the private investors and government on how they can put a portion, either 40% to SMEs, and then build their capacity, share the requirements of what they need, and where possible, we are looking for investors to also set up common manufacturing facilities where SMEs can pay per hour or per day and produce high-quality, standardized products. The other challenge we have is lack of harmonization in the region, EAC and Africa. So a product can be of good quality in Kenya, but it's rejected in another market. So we are looking for ways of really promoting harmonization of these standards so that goods can move freely and people can move freely and SMEs can be able to also access those markets. The most recent innovation at KICC we saw is that sometimes SMEs can't travel. Some of them are using e-commerce platforms, but we are saying as people come, bring buyers, foreign affairs, as you bring buyers to Kenya, can we have sessions for SMEs so that they meet these business delegations here in Kenya? Because not every Kenyan can travel to Germany or like what's happening at Radisson Blu or travel to France. But when these delegations come to Kenya, could we be having sessions where, you know, we get to understand who wants to partner with SMEs and SMEs can access information in that area? Lastly, in relation to diplomacy, we've seen a lot of partnership. I heard the PSA, we say also the good things that are working. We've received very good reception by the diplomats, the commercial attaches when we go to these other countries, and they really support us in doing due diligence, in connecting to business networks, and even follow-ups later on, and supporting us in mobilizing businesses that can then work with Kenyan businesses. So we are now very proud of that kind of connection, and we always report to these embassies because there's a good understanding around what we are looking for. And then we also access diaspora Kenyans in those embassies, and the diaspora Kenyans are very good ambassadors for sharing Kenyan culture, Kenyan products, you know, explaining the quality of Kenyan products that then makes people admire or want to use our products. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Madam Fatma, Joyce has spoken about market linkages for the micro and small enterprises. How can they take advantage of the regional trade agreements signed to expand their reach beyond the local borders?
Thank you very much for that question. I think listening to my previous panelists, a lot of what I might have said has been said. So this gives me a chance also to bring in how to tap from the perspective of Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency. How do we tap into these trade agreements, and how do we tap into the opportunities that abound for Kenyan MSMEs and SMEs, just to separate the two. So when we look at a market like the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, I would start there because for our MSMEs, this is really low-hanging fruit. You don't need to think about large logistic issues. You don't need to think about some very extremely high standards or stringent setbacks that you may face in looking beyond parts of Africa. So to access this market under the AfCFTA, look, we can look at taking advantage of existing export ecosystems. Everybody, the previous panel and even on this panel, we've talked about the Trade Connect Africa initiative. What makes it unique? It offers an end-to-end ecosystem for exporters. And what I particularly want to point out about this is that it talks about aggregation. So you're looking at an opportunity where you don't have to have the ability to fill a whole container by yourself or even two people. You can look at 30 different MSMEs filling one container and being provided with that financial instrument, that insurance instrument, that warehouse and off-taker opportunity, which is normally where most MSMEs actually are shy to get into exports because they don't want to take that risk, and understandably, it's a huge risk to take. So looking at those opportunities from aggregators and innovators in the ecosystem, such as Trade Connect Africa initiative by Real Sources Africa, and also looking at what Afri-Exim Bank has to offer us, Africa becomes very attractive. Afri-Exim has the Africa Trade Gateway product that is extremely interesting because it not only identifies the opportunity for our MSMEs, it offers due diligence for the orders and opportunities that it provides. It offers access to finance, and it actually almost all but guarantees you a successful entry into the market. So those are one of the things that I think we need to look at. The same can be said for the trade agreements we have with EU and AGOA, where we have quite a lot of lines that we are not yet in a position to actually take advantage of. And I liked what Joyce spoke of from CAM, looking at different sectors and looking at innovations there and finding solutions into the different markets that are there. So we have trade, we have low-hanging fruit with the EU EPA. There's a lot of sensitization and awareness going on that. But I want to also look at this from a slightly different perspective. We have a lot of trade agreements, say the Middle East. There's a growing demand for halal products. This is becoming one of the largest areas that should be tapped into. And I would like to encourage the Chamber President, Dr. Ruto, I would like to encourage Joyce, look in that direction. I'd like to encourage Madam PS, encourage MSMEs to look in that direction. It is a fact today that if Kenyans stop eating all the halal sausages that were produced by meat packers and by Ken Meat and any other, even if we stopped eating them, we can't meet the demand for Nigeria. We can't. It's simple English. So stop eating sausages today, take them all to Nigeria, and still you will not meet the demand. Look at those opportunities. How do we access them? It means we must think about Kenya from the perspective of the opportunities that are provided to us. You look at health and well-being. There's a lot of interest in moringa, baobab, chia products. How are we encouraging our agriculture sector to venture into these particular products and production and looking at value addition for those? That will help us tap into the European market. It will help us tap and take advantage of the EU EPA, take advantage of AGOA, take advantage of the SEPA, and look at also Africa. That is a growing area of interest. What about BPOs, business process outsourcing services? It seems to be an area that we are not looking at as an opportunity. I can give you one example, just one, GrabHub. GrabHub has 375,000 outlets, and currently in Kenya, under one of the BPOs, 6,000 Kenyans have been employed to offer 24-hour service for that. So that is just one account. We have a large population of well-educated, digital savvy Kenyans. We're also calling them Gen Zs on other platforms. We can look at that MSME, very easy to set up, and see how are we able to offer this service out there. So opportunities are there. And we know of countries making it big in this. So we are able to take advantage of our trade agreements by thinking in a way of what are the consumer preferences, what are the consumer trends, so that we don't just go to what is traditional. Let's look at what's happening, take the first mover advantage, move our production thinking into that. And I think just to talk a little bit about what KEPROBA does, we are mandated to implement export policies and nation branding policies. A lot has been said about exports, so let me talk about nation branding. What does it do for you? How does it open up the door for you in Africa? How does it do that in Europe and the Americas? Because the brand goes ahead of the product or even the country. So if we are able to look at nation branding as a must-have at CAM, at Chambers, at KEPSA, that we must think in terms of sector branding. How do we talk about our meat and meat products? How do we bring one brand proposition to bear for our value chains that we are focusing on? How do we innovate in coffee and let the world know that we are innovating? How do we do the same for specialty teas? Build that brand, do it together as a country. It cannot be left to one person to do. We have been told it's about the private sector. They are on the triple benefit, the triple bottom line benefit. Therefore, if they play a role in nation branding, it is them who will reap that benefit. So I think at that level, just to let you know how we can take advantage of the trade agreements that we have to learn how to think together and compete when we leave Kenya. I think one of the things that hurting us sometimes is we compete internally and then hope that the outside world will help us along. It doesn't work like that. So if we want to take full advantage of Africa, FCFTA, we need to put our heads together and say what is a common area of focus and what's a common area of gain and win for the country, and go for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fatma. My last question will go to Mr. Malim. It is estimated that Kenya hosts around 700,000 refugees. This population requires empowerment. With coming into force of the new Kenya Refugee Act 2021, what are your views on the effect of this new development?
Thank you. Okay. I will make 3 points, but before you do that, please allow me to just briefly put the context to this. In addition to the refugee numbers that just been mentioned, this region represents 20% of the entire humanitarian caseload of people in need, in terms of humanitarian needs. But we always look at people in need, but actually what we also miss is that this represents a huge amount. I mean, the sector, for example, though we need 2 to 3 times that amount, actually right now, the sector is almost close to 1.3 trillion shillings annually in terms of the amount of resources that is invested in humanitarian response in Kenya and in the neighboring countries in the region. 1.3 trillion. Affecting almost close to 70 million people. These matters. So let me just talk a little bit about Kenya's Progressive Refugee Act, but also other accompanying legislation, plus also plans and other government programs. Kenya has one of the most progressive refugee laws. It's one of the laws that allows refugees to be able to have access to free movement, plus also be able to engage in trade, in engagement in livelihood activities. We have the Community Registration Act that allows refugee organizations to be registered. We have the government is providing with refugees identity cards that allows them to be able to be integrated within government e-systems, which allows them then to be able to be active members of the economy. This is vital because Kenya is a critical and a leading country in this region and globally, and what Kenya does matters. If Kenya is leading on progressive laws, it has an implication of influencing other neighboring governments, but also globally in terms of having favorable laws and regulations that support refugees and other vulnerable peoples who are affected by displacement across the region. It's also good business. We have seen the benefits of these laws in terms of really allowing us, for example, to be very effective in the delivery of that humanitarian assistance. Previously, under encampment policies, the only viable option is to bring food, tracking food for people to be able to survive. Today, through these progressive policies, we can be able to allow refugees to invest and make money and grow, potentially contribute to the economy. But it's also allow us, for example, previously, if we are only able to do food distribution, today we can be able to do cash programming, which then injects the required cash into the economy. As soon as you give $100 to your refugees, they're able to invest that money, part of it into businesses, part of it in buying from the local markets, and that creates that vibrant economy as well. But it's also very important to note that it makes even the delivery of humanitarian assistance much cheaper, because it allows then for much more effective, using the private sector to be able to have a much more competitive ways of delivering of humanitarian assistance rather than this delivery of assistance through contracting of trucks to deliver food. It's also vital to note that I think because of this vibrancy within the refugee population, the growth of businesses, and you know areas like the Dab and Kakuma are seen as now major towns in Kenya. But refugees are also influencing businesses in towns and cities like Nairobi as well. But now we'll just end by just making an appeal. The appeal is first to really understand the sector from both the private sector, but also from our officials in foreign service. Because the understanding of the humanitarian sector is the first key step toward leveraging. Because Kenya can localize these policies locally, but can also learn from that and then through diplomatic service influence other entities as well to be able to then bring the collective change process that we need. We are currently facing a significant financial crunch when it comes to addressing humanitarian needs across the globe because of the increasing levels of need attributed to the increasing levels of conflict that's resulting in large numbers of displacement. And in the last just decade, the number of people internally displaced in Africa have tripled. But in addition to that, we're seeing significant constraint on resources. It is vital that we provide the assistance we need for this most vulnerable population. But it is good business to be able to leverage that assistance in a way that is productive and that can help us really transform our economy. And that understanding of that sector and how we can contribute towards this transformation through a business lens, through a foreign diplomatic lens, is critical. And I think Kenya is already taking good steps towards that. And we're facing some challenges in that regard. And some of these challenges, for example, is still there are inconsistencies in some of the policies. There's still much more need for engagement and more active contribution by all of society in the humanitarian response, rather than seeing it as something foreign, something a little bit distant, something that doesn't concern us a little bit more, but a little bit strengthening that engagement. And then for the private sector, just to note that I mentioned that out of the 1.3 trillion shillings that we currently use for humanitarian response, 60% of that relates to supply chain. 60% of that money. The rest are used for operational costs, but 60% is the supply chain. The private sector can play an important role, particularly innovation. Kenya, for example, today, and Nairobi primarily, is becoming a crucible for innovation when it comes to humanitarian response. Partially because of the role of the private sector and the partnership we have with the private sector, but also because of the favorable policies and legal environment that exists and the welcoming nature of the Kenyan people as well. And that is something that we can leverage further to continue to strengthen the engagement we have in terms of this economic diplomacy when it comes to humanitarian assistance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malim. Ambassador Masela, allow me to give this opportunity to the Chamber President to give the final remarks and invite the PS also to give her final remarks.
Yeah, maybe not final remarks, but maybe an announcement. And also to response to my colleague panelist here from CAM, that as a Kenya, we're very lucky. We are going to host the World Chambers Federation. So for the SMEs who are not able to travel to look for markets, we shall be hosting the largest business forum next year in the month of April from 9, 10, and 11th of April here at KICC. And we're going to bring the world leaders in chambers of commerce. We're going to have B2B exhibitions, and we're going to attract around 4,500 business delegates who are going to come to Nairobi. So I want to welcome the Kenya's best to come and exhibit to these approximately 800 leaders of the chambers globally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Final remarks? Yes. Okay, thank you. I still want us to walk through the 60 years diplomatic journey that this country has walked and ask ourselves in view of MSME, where are we? As we take stock of how far we've come, I think in the MSME sector, we are at a realization that MSME is very critical to economy, and this is demonstrated by the current administration, which has now, established a ministry just to focus on MSME development since independence. This is the first time we are having a ministry that focuses on the MSME. Then also, if you look at the private sector in Kenya is entirely MSME, because 98% of all businesses in Kenya are MSME, micro, small, and medium enterprises. So even as we talk about opportunities we have in the export space, even in domestic space, if you ask yourself, who are traders? Traders are MSME. Sadly though, most of them are micros and therefore require a lot of support. And that's how now the government has come up working closely with the private sector to intervene in the market. For example, in the financing sector, the Hustler Fund, when we came up with the Hustler Fund, was just to correct the existing market failure where majority of the population at the bottom of the economic pyramid were not being served in the mainstream financing sector. So why were they not being served? Because first, majority of them are young people who their only entitlement probably is their birth certificate and the certificate they acquire in school, because they don't own means of production. They don't own lands. Most of them are women, and as we know, our women, when it comes to inheritance, we are still challenged. They don't also own properties. But given that they're the majority, how do we support them to unlock access to credit? And so we came up with the Hustler Fund to help introduce another form of collateralization around the creditworthiness. And today, as we speak, we created a pipeline and we opened it up to all Kenyans. You could borrow from 500 when we launched 2 years ago, up to then up to 50,000. And today we have Kenyans who are actually borrowing up to 50,000. They have grown their credit limit. As they grow, they're also growing their credit rating. So we have been able to disburse close to 60 billion to 24 million Kenyans, and we introduce a component on mandatory saving 5%, for your borrowing. It's mandatory. So we have mobilized close to 3.3 billion Kenyan shillings. And what was the purpose of the saving? So that then we start helping Kenyans to de-risk, themselves out of shocks. Why are we doing this? We are doing this because we are looking into a future where MSMEs can walk to the bank and borrow against their credit rating as opposed to the traditional collaterals that we have today, which are out of their reach. That's what we want to bring to economy. So when we talk about success points, today if you ask me, out of the 24 million 2 years down the line, what can you say? I can proudly say the 2 million people who have so far demonstrated good borrowing behavior, we want to take them to another level, a level where they can borrow more to invest even in the manufacturing sector against their credit rating as opposed to land title deed or their payslip. And I want also to respond just to what my colleagues here were saying. In terms of creating a conducive policy environment, I will say if you ever desired to exist within a moment where you have good political goodwill, it is this time round. Because all those policies that have been stuck, for example, startup bill as we speak today, is already in the House, going through the third reading. We, as a sector, we have made a proposal amendments to align it to our present priorities. So it is a piece of legislation that will support us to promote startup, a very supportive startup ecosystem, where our young people who have great innovation can thrive and get finance and also get to enterprise the innovation. We are talking about a cooperative model. Already we have a cooperative bill, which is underway, and just to see how do we aggregate. Our lady there from Kiproba talked about aggregation, because I talked about us, majority of MSME being micro-entrepreneur. So they lack individual capabilities to even achieve economies of scale. So how to beat around that and to make sure they don't miss on opportunities is to aggregate them, cluster them. So we're really promoting cooperative, and we're really doing a lot of re-engineering around the existing cooperative movements. Then lastly, we're talking about, as a government, we put in a lot of efforts to open up new markets. For example, in the ESC space, every year, we usually facilitate close to 500 MSMEs drawn across our key value chain, especially in agriculture, to have experience of the now expanded regional market. We are looking at 300 million population. About a month ago, we were in Juba, where we took more than 500 MSMEs. And the number of them, when they came back, they were calling us. They came back with a lot of, contracts, deals, and that is now opening their space and enabling them achieve that, at least to have a share in the regional market. We also, when we came back together, working closely with Kenya National Chambers of Commerce, we able at least to send out the first consignment of about 33 containers by an MSME, 27-year-old MSME, who was able to facilitate that and was sending the containers to Juba, to Zambia, and to DRC Congo, Kinshasa. So you see there is a lot that is happening. And we already have a facility in place, especially for MSMEs who are interested in exploiting opportunities in intra-Africa trade. We are in partnership with the UBA Bank. They have a facility of about 275 million USD just for Kenya to support MSMEs. And as we all know, the AfCFTA have already finalized on the protocol on youth and women in trade, giving some sort of preferential treatment to the young people and to the women who are interested. Also, we are at an advanced stage negotiating strategic trade investment partnership, and we have a whole chapter on MSME where myself have taken part in negotiating, in just also making sure that it takes into consideration the local context of where our MSMEs are. Because the number of times we negotiate those agreements, but when it comes to implementation, you realize there will be very low uptake, because when we were negotiating, we never presented the context of who our MSMEs are back home. So I want to say there are massive opportunities happening in that space. But the beautiful thing is the political goodwill that we are enjoying right now to supporting MSME. I'm a State Department that is private sector facing. So whatever I do, we do closely and in partnership with MSME. And to finalize, final, we already have established as a ministry a round table, an MSME private sector round table, where we meet and discuss all issues in our ecosystem. For example, there could be issues touching on the taxation. We meet together so that then we get to have the feeling and the input from the private sector. Because at the end of the day, we can come up with policy, but for the policies to be effective, you need a buy-in and an alignment from the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A big round of applause for the panelists. That marks the end of this panel discussion. Thank you very much, Ambassador Masila, for indulging us.
Thank you very much, Kitavi and the panelists. Let's give them another round of applause, please. So as they take the photograph, I want to request the next panel and the last one. I also want to request Mr. Malim to remain behind. Mr. Malim, I wanted to request you remain behind for the next one also. Yeah, there's a request that you join the next one, so please. Yeah, so I want to invite the moderator for the next panel, Dr. Tony, please, and also Khadija to come in front, please.
Thanks very much. My name is Tony Omwansa, currently serving as the CEO of Kenya National Innovation Agency. Our mandate revolves around nurturing an ecosystem that leverages ideas, innovative ideas, to build scalable solutions, startups, and high-value ventures, in a nutshell. And that requires building skills, building partnerships, ensuring appropriate policy, attracting the right funding at the various levels of maturity of innovative ideas, and enhancing the infrastructure that exploits intellectual property for purposes of creating high net worth opportunities. I have an amazing panel of two. Should have been more, but I guess also the time has gone. So I will invite my two colleagues to introduce themselves, and then I will go to the first question.
Good afternoon. I'm Hadija Mohammed. I am the country media director at Huawei Technologies. Huawei is a vast technology company that focuses on many technology, on areas like digital and solar power, infrastructure for telecommunication, and then of course, what most of you know, phones, tablets, laptops, earpods, and things like that. Happy to be here. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks. My name again is Hajir Malim. I'm the Regional Director for Norwegian Refugee Council in East and Southern Africa. Norwegian Refugee Council is recognized as a global lead agency in dealing with displacements, those affected by displacements. Thank you.
Okay, so we are having a conversation today around science, technology, and innovation in driving Kenya's development agenda. And a simple paragraph has been written here that I thought it would be useful for me to read it so we appreciate word for word. That the integration of science, technology, and innovation into our national policies is not just an option, rather it is a necessity. With the rapid advancements in these fields, we have unprecedented opportunities to address some of the most pressing challenges, from food security to healthcare to climate change and economic growth. In this session, we will explore how innovation can serve as a catalyst for achieving the ambitious goal outlined in Kenya Vision 2030 and the bottom economic transformation agenda, bottom up. Our esteemed panelists, the two of them I have here, have some great knowledge and experience across various sectors, including industry, government, and tech. And they will share some insights, also give some recommendations of how we could leverage technology and innovation for economic development. Just as a background, the head of state made a clear pronouncement on Wednesday last week when he officiated the Kenya Innovation Week that he would like us to leverage the Innovation Agency at the Office of the President to coordinate more effectively the identification of progressive ideas, the nurturing of those ideas, and the scaling of those ideas. That ranges from issues of infrastructure, skills, policy, funding, and access to market. Now, with that little background of appreciation that science is the foundation, and then we build leveraging technology to create amazing ideas that then transform society. I'd like to ask my two panelists to give me a sense what their background has been in terms of interacting with science, technology, and innovation for economic development, based on your work environment, because you come from very two extreme ones, but what has been your journey and experience around SD&I for economic development? I'll start with you, Hadija.
Thank you, Tony. For me, I work in a very intense technology environment, and one of the things that I would mention is what I find easy in the environment I work in is how things are easy to do with the use of technology. We communicate very easily because we have, like our headquarters is in China and we're based in Kenya, but we have devices that within less than a minute, a document that is needed in Kenya can effectively be received in Kenya, and it looks like an original signed document. Our services, approvals, and most of directions that the company operates in come from our HQ. You see that will be action in less than 15, 20 minutes, and you're able to move to the next. I've also been able to see how things like digital and solar power, the inverters, how the safety structures and how the components of inverters that are built by the Huawei system, how they improve lives, how they make things like farming easy, how they make things like powering places like the rural and remote areas where probably are operating off the grid. So access to technology gives me visibility to see how things become easy to do, how accessibility to other resources or services becomes easy with the availability of technology. The other thing is availability of the internet in Kenya. Huawei plays a very big role in the backbone infrastructure of the work that Safaricom does in this country. So the ability to make internet accessible, affordable to not just every individual, but to homes, to offices, to the youth, to the markets and all that, that capability of seeing how things are moved, that simple bit of where you're able to get on your phone, order a device or order maybe a simple service from an e-commerce business. A rider is on the way, they're coming, they're bringing services to you. 20 years ago, we never had this. You had to go to the market, you had to negotiate for what you want. But today, at the comfort of your living room, you sitting on your phone, you will order your groceries, you will order your food, you will order your medicine. 20, 15, 30 minutes, it's at your doorstep. That is technology working and making life easy for people. That is what I get to see in action every day for me, and what I get to see, the opportunities that are people constantly working on to improve or to bring to life. That's my experience.
That's an amazing story there, Haji.
Thanks. In the humanitarian sector, what we have seen in terms of the levels of needs, they're becoming much more and more concentrated in very fragile, very hard to reach, conflict-prone communities. So technology and innovation is quite very critical in reaching this kind of population. For example, for Norwegian Refugee Council, we have this ambition that 40% of our portfolio should be in areas where nobody else can go. Some places where we go, for example, in contexts like Sudan, is areas that are highly insecure. So technology becomes an enabler to allow us to be able to access some of this key population. The second key area in which we find the use of technology, where we can leverage the use of technology, relates to the issue I mentioned earlier about the divergence between the scale of the humanitarian needs vis-a-vis the resources. When you have huge needs and there are limited resources, we find technology as a lever to be able to bridge that gap in terms of bringing efficiency, in terms of really finding creative way for addressing the problems that we face. The third key area I think we use technology more, it relates to the aspect of youth empowerment. We have a bulging youth population in many of these countries where we work, and many of the youth sometimes haven't gone to school. So how can we be able to use technology to first bring schools to them? Because the schools might not be there in the communities where they're growing. So we have utilized technology for online education, but more so as well to create online job opportunities. In Kakuma, for instance, we have trained refugee youth, and even the local youth as well, in the use of technology, where they're now able to get freelance jobs with IT companies abroad. And finally, the fourth area in which we have used technology effectively is in accountability. It is very, very important to get the right information, but it's also very, very important to give back the right information. And technology has helped us in terms of leveraging that accountability of us as an agency towards the population that we serve. And technology is also a way in which we can be able to collect information from these people, not only on their needs, but also on their assessment of the work we do. And that allows us then to be able to enhance our quality of our services.
Thank you, really great. Now I'm coming back for the second round of questions, and I will come to you in the space of skills and capacity development. I'll come to you on a question of inclusivity and providing opportunity for everyone, particularly now that you're dealing with the marginal areas. But as general observation I have made over time, there's a tendency to think about innovation or creating innovative ideas as just an accident, that I came up with this great idea just in the middle of nowhere. So it kind of oversimplifies the process of building innovative ideas and startups as a result of that effort. And the second thing I've also observed is that out of research, ideas that are well thought out, researched, and tested have a high likelihood of success. And that's where skills comes from. In fact, in the US, they say it's up to 70% chances higher that ideas that are well researched tend to thrive. And we are in a context in Kenya, but we interface with the rest of the world. So we have to compete, and we have to try and position ourselves appropriately globally. Currently, the innovation index in the world ranks Kenya number 896, partly also because data has not been very well submitted. But we do have lots of opportunity to improve. But at the same time, in that regard, the point is that you're competing globally. But at the same time, you've got the extreme people who are not advantaged as others would, and they don't have access to the connectivity as you described. You would help us to think a little bit about how intentional we are in being inclusive and opening opportunities for the informal to also find their way into the formal environment, because that's really where we compete effectively. So speak to us a little bit about skills development for innovation.
Thank you, Tony. I like the points that you've mentioned about how research and development sits at the heart of building skills and development. The company I come from, actually, Huawei, invests a large portion of our profits and income back into research and development. We are on a constant cycle of researching, trying to see how we can develop and become better. Onto your question, how we can leverage skills and development, tap into development and all that. I believe, especially the private companies and the private sector, has the ability to lend capital in terms of skills to the government in supporting the youth or the young people to have capacity building and training opportunities for them to be able to see what happens outside the world, and also to be able to experience how is the work environment in international organization. I give you an example. At Huawei, we run a very device program called the ICT Academy. What happens in this program is we invite young students from the universities. We let them come in for a competition, but before they compete, they are trained, and then after they train, they take an exam, and then we take these students for a tour of several commercial companies in China, where they get to have industrial experience of how those companies operate. Then they compete on a global level against other companies. You see, what this kind of program offers the youth in terms of skills development is exposure, understanding the needs of your local area, and being able to go out there and seeing what other people are doing. You know, you're interacting with people from South Africa, Nigeria, over 60 countries globally, and everybody has come in with solutions unique to their countries. It opens up your brain to start thinking, what solutions then can I offer to my local area or to my local community, or just locally to my Kenya community, that will be able then to improve the environment that I live in, or the specific areas that need innovation or skills development. The other good example I want to maybe share is the Huawei Management Training Program. Every year we take in about 30 or 40 students from different universities around Kenya. We bring them in to the organization, and they are placed in different departments, you know, engineering, finance, sales, and all that. At the end of the year, these students, there are those that will go through an exam and they'll be able to stay inside Huawei, and there are those that then maybe we recommend to our partners, channel partners, people that we work with, like Safaricom, Davis and Shatleaf, you know, Computech and all that. We recommend, and these people are able to be absorbed into the work market or the workforce, you know. And what this helps with is a lot of people come out from the university, you've been taught theory. You don't really have the scope or the outline of how it really is in the work environment. How do you speak to people in the office? It's the basic things. How do you dress? You know, how do you address your boss? What are the times you show up in the office? What is office etiquette? Such kind of things, even before you get into doing the work, or even before you get into doing the, you know, the reports or the engineering and all that. So I feel like things like management trainee programs contribute a big deal into building skills and leveraging development into the country. The other thing is, I think, collaboration between the government and private organizations into surveying to understand where are the gaps and the needs for the local country. So this understanding then brings us an opportunity to localize the solutions that international technology organizations produce for the country. Because in terms of development and in terms of growth, you cannot say Kenya is where America is. A solution that works in America cannot automatically work in Kenya. A solution that is working in China cannot automatically work in Kenya. We need to be able to create partnerships with the government that can be able to help us understand how do we then leverage to localize these opportunities so that then they can be able to work for skill development in the local environment and grow the local environment into development.
Thank you very much. I mean, you've spoken to two issues there, not only skills, but you've also looked at the private and private partnership with government. And I think you've addressed my next question. So I'll probably bring you closer to some kind of wrapping after the second round of questions is exhausted. Thanks.
Okay. No, thanks. Now on inclusivity, I think first we need to debunk some assumptions that we always make. At the beginning, we thought maybe local people, vulnerable population like refugees and all, don't even have access to connectivity. So we went ahead and did an assessment, and we were very surprised with the finding we had. Actually, people prioritize connectivity, even if it's just a mobile phone, having a mobile phone. There was more than 80%, for example, access to mobile phones in a number of refugee camps or settlements in these regions. So even the vulnerable people prioritize because they know the value of that connection. So there is that infrastructure that already exists that can be leveraged in terms of enhancing inclusivity. The second key aspect relates to the issue a little bit about how we can be able to use technology to do crowdsourcing of information. And for example, during the big drought in Somalia recently, Our website was created where it was getting information from local people. So people report. And through that community crowdsourcing of information, we can be able to really map where there are gaps. So you can know, I think we don't have maybe sometimes the government might have that machinery, but often even the government or even companies do not have the machinery to be able to be everywhere to collect information. But the technology allows you to be able to collect that information in real time. And through that analysis, you can be able to identify where there are exclusion and inclusion errors in our programming as well. So and that is how technology can help in terms of enhancing inclusion. The third thing, one of the most marginalized groups are women. And we have seen, for example, when we adopted, for example, cash programming modality and giving cash, sometimes women tend to be disfranchised. And we've used technology to be able to transfer money directly to them. And therefore, you can see that technology can be able to enhance and be able to reach a certain segment of the population that sometimes cannot be reached through traditional programming. And finally, for me, I will just say, one key way of addressing inclusion is ensuring there is enhanced capacity. Through use of technology, including translation into multiple languages, the technology allows you to be able to really amplify your message in multiple languages. And we have seen this in social media and across the internet. We have utilized previously conventional training. You can only invite maybe 100 people into a seminar. Today, through the use of technology, you can be able to broadcast your training in multiple languages and therefore reach a wide breadth of the society and therefore address these gaps in terms of reach as well.
So my last question, thanks very much. My last question is around international collaboration and how to leverage, brothers and sisters in other countries and systems in other countries to expand our capacity to access broader markets. One classic example, I visited a university in India called IIT Madras, and they have a target of creating 1 patent per day. And then the issue is commercialization and technology transfer to other, to either private sector or solutions that they have created to other markets through soft landing programs and such like. So this is, how do you see it from your end in terms of leveraging international collaborations to advance science, technology, and innovation, and by extension, quality of life of people, enhancing access to market, and growing our opportunities. I mean, you think about AFCFTA, you think about Africa Union, you think about the global network. 2 months ago, we set up something we call Kenya-India Innovation Nexus. And one of the things we are working on is creating soft landing of innovative solutions that have been created in India that could be relevant for this market and vice versa. So I'll invite both of you to speak about your experiences and aspirations around international relations. Over to you.
Oh, wow. You're taking me back to class many years ago. Okay. Thank you, Tony. I think collaboration and partnership sits at the heart of development, especially economic development and strategic growth. And this will help largely in leveraging international support to ensure growth and development in the country. A good example is the Luban workshop that we have, which is a collaboration between Machakos University and the Tianjin TVET. So it's about sharing technology faster and not trying to reinvent the wheel, because really there's nothing new under the sun. You just have to find ways to localize what exists and make it usable for you in your country. We operate, globally we operate within the same diseases, the same problems. I mean, a woman will give birth the same way. A child would need the same vaccinations. There are different variances here and there, but then we just have to find ways to localize technology through collaboration and partnerships with international institutions to make sure that the solutions that are available will be able to work for us in the space that we operate in. Huawei works very closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Whenever we have projects that we feel we can involve the government of Kenya through collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are able to identify stakeholders that are suitable and strategic for those partnerships. And through those recommendations that we get, we tap in. We have successful engagement that then enable us to implement the things that we need to implement. You know, a good example is the MOU that Huawei signed with the Ministry of ICT and the Government of Kenya last year in October, plays a major role in the implementation of the digital superhighway, which is a key component of the President's development agenda in the country. So largely, we just have to emphasize and really focus into collaboration and partnerships that then encompasses what we want to do at the local level to grow and strategically achieve our development agenda. Thank you.
Thanks. So one way of doing it first is localizing the solution as much as possible and allowing for self-generated ideas to flourish. How do we do that? Create an element of competition. What we found, for example, as an agency, we decided to run a competition and to ask anyone with creative solutions, we have a certain amount of money, seed money, that we can be able to support you to be able to develop your idea. The youth today, I mean, look at your child at home. They are very good in the use of technology, very gifted. If we can be able to nurture this talent, especially from young age, through even a small element of competition in partnership with private sector, for instance, because the private sector will benefit from these solutions, because this will make the cost of doing business cheaper, they might make efficiency, and might have other benefits. That's one. The second key thing is, which is becoming an inhibiting factor for the growth of technological solution in this region primarily, is the cost. Look, if you travel around, the cost of even roaming, telephone roaming services is going down at the moment right now, but it is expensive. So similarly, the cost for internet. We had to provide subsidy to support our country offices in the neighboring countries because some of them can't afford to run the cost of internet services. So I think there is need to work at East Africa level, at regional level, to try and bring the cost of these technological solutions down. Then that can allow much more growth of that transfer of knowledge and expertise across the region. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think we've had some engagement here. And within the context of our international relations, this team is available for further consultation and engagement beyond here. So this is an opportunity to bring this panel to the end. Let's appreciate our two great panelists who've made our evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another round of applause for our panelists and the moderator. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of that segment and basically the segments on the panel discussions. So we go to the last part of the program for today, which is the closing segment. And after that, we shall have a vote of thanks, and then we conclude our session for today. And Sawa. So with that, I want to invite again PS, the State Department for MSME, to give us the closing reflections on today's session. So kindly, PS, karibu.
Thank you so much, Balozi. Oh, thank you. And so it's usually very difficult to close after participating in a panel because the risk of repeating yourself, what you said, is usually very high. But I'll try as much as possible to reduce the risk. So first of all, let me just begin by thanking, I had not said that during the panel, those the organizers, of course, my very good counterpart, PS, for Foreign Affairs, and his team, and of course the leadership of his ministry, and of course also the government of Kenya for giving us this opportunity just to walk through the 60 years of our diplomatic journey. And for me, from where I sit, I look at it from the economic diplomacy. So I know today's session, especially these afternoon sessions, the panel sessions, were all oscillating around the economic diplomacy. I came in when the first session had begun, but I want to believe it was around opportunities that we have in international market space, We saw PS for trade, and the panel which we found there are key players and key decision makers at that stage. So, but my insights will be about why economic diplomacy. I think to me, this is the most important segment of our diplomatic relationship, because it brings us to a level where we have something to exchange. We have a value. We also feel there's something that we are putting on the table, and there is some sort of dependence on us. Because if you are exchanging something, it means then in your absence, there's somebody somewhere that will feel it. So this is the most pronounced diplomatic relationship that we should have because of that value. So 60 years down the line, what is it that we have achieved? I think the three panel sessions have been taking us through the journey in terms of what Kenya as a country have achieved, how we have positioned ourselves, our various competitive advantages. If you look at the export market, we have massive opportunities. We've talked about EPA, the economic partnership that is right now underway with the European Union, which will open us up to the market in Europe. We are talking about various trade agreements that we are having with other continents, especially Asia. We're talking about strategic trade and investment partnership with the US government. And if we manage to sign that partnership, we are going to be the first sub-Saharan country, if I'm not wrong, to be strategic trade partner of the United States of America, exposing our MSMEs, our traders, the people of Kenya, to one of the biggest market or one of the largest economy in the world. So this is not a small achievement, it's a very big achievement. And all this has not just come overnight. It's been a journey that we started working the last 60 years. We have also tightened our bilateral engagement with other countries, economies. For example, if you look at Europe, Germany have been very instrumental with us. And for me, in my sector of MSME, I have an institution, Kenya Industrial Estate, that was formed immediately after independence to support the Kenyan African with the financing so that they can invest in the manufacturing sector. It's been there, and we have enjoyed close ties with the German government, supporting us, institutional capacity building, supporting us also in other programs that builds the capabilities of our population to venture into the manufacturing sector. So there's quite a lot that we have enjoyed in that space. And we talk about the preparedness, especially the panel. After opening up these opportunities, what is the level of preparedness of our population? And that's why, as a government, then, we have now renewed focus on the MSME sector. And I want to say here, without fear of being quoted or what, that where we are placing the MSME sector, we are elevating MSME sector to sit at the level of all our key primary sector. When you have education, when you have healthcare, and where you have agriculture, next to it is MSME. And why? Because we have a potential workforce of 20 million Kenyans, only about 3.5 million are formally employed, leaving out close to 18 million Kenyans outside there hustling their way around. So how do we take care of those 18 million? And the civil service can only take up to 1 million. Actually, we are not yet even 1 million. 2.5 million are employed formally in the private sector. So that shows us where we have a room to create jobs, to generate value, to drive a livelihood to our people is in the MSME sector. So MSME sector is now a basic sector. The kind of efforts and investment we place in education, efforts we place in agriculture, in healthcare, that the same efforts that we also need to place in the MSME sector to enable us grow a thriving private sector that can create jobs and sustainable and secure jobs opportunity for our young people. We talked about what is it in the last panel, what is it that we have? What is it that we are proud of? Today, what Kenya is proud of, and so to speak the whole of the continent, Africa is proud of its youthful population. In fact, the youth as a resource has now overtaken gold and all those minerals that are in Africa because of the human capital potential. We talk about, if you were to look back into a country, Kenya, what does this mean? Averagely, we are 17 years old. So when we are 17 years old, it means we do not just have today and tomorrow, we have the future. We can think about future, we can sit down and think about 100 years to come because of the robust, youthful population that we have here. And so this one makes us to be technologically ready, another competitive advantage we have over and above. So I was going through statistics, and it's about startups. Kenya accounted for the largest pool of startups that were supported. We attracted more financing in the whole of the continent. And this is because of our young people who each and every day are coming up with very good ideas. And because of this, Kenya is on that map. 2 weeks ago, in collaboration with the State Department of ICT, we launched an initiative which is going to be supported by UN, which is called Tumbukutu. Tumbukutu is about building a tech ecosystems, hubs around the continent. And we are lucky here in Kenya, in the region, because we will be hosting the Green Energy Tech Hub at the Concert City. And that initiative aims to support about 10,000 startups. And they want to mobilize about $1 billion to invest into those startups. Because we know that our competitiveness is in that space. I'm sure out of those 10,000 startups, I'm sure we could claim close to 50% because our young people will not allow us not to get over 50% of that. Then finally, we want to talk about technology and livelihood. Today morning, I was privileged to be visited by women who have started a good initiative on women in technology. And our brief conversation with them was, I'm looking at how are they going to bridge the digital divide so that women can still, technology can help women to do everything while they still remain women. In other words, they can progress in their career while they're still wives, while they're still mothers. Because what has been happening, that we can graduate the same year, but my male counterpart will grow very fast, will progress faster than me because of our other biological, duty that we have as women, because of you have to take your maternity. But technology can bring about those solutions. So we are happy because of that interest that is rising from all corners about technology. And I think we are going to move our technology from just mere infrastructure to making utility out of those infrastructure that our government is heavily investing in. We all know there is a commitment to set up more than 100,000, additional 100,000 kilometers of digital superhighways, but then they can just remain superhighways if there is no value to them. Value is to promote innovation. My friend Tony, yesterday we were having a conversation to moot certain proposals, and Kenya National Innovation Agency kept on featuring, and we know you have a position, you have a role you're playing, and we want just to build a supportive ecosystem to be able to support the innovation from the conceptual stage to take them to the market. So we in the MSME sector, we pick it up in the commercialization phase. We need to do market access, product development, financing, investment, and taking them to the market, but you will help us to coordinate your sub-ecosystem, which includes higher learning institutions and other institutions like KICC, all that are involved in ideation stages to help how do we then enterprise this technology and how to transfer it and how do we create value to it. So again, I want to announce again that the startup bill that has been in store for a while is now being unlocked, that process, and I think it's now gone through the third reading, and very soon we'll have that new piece of legislation to support building up a very supportive startup ecosystem. So having said that, I want to say the massive opportunities, and Kenya continues to position itself thanks to the efforts which are getting through the leadership of this country, His Excellency President Dr. William Samoei Ruto, who is our diplomat, #1, plus of course also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They've really done a lot. So we'll continue to support you. But the most important thing as I finish is that let's look at our diplomacy from an economic perspective. How does it help us to achieve the economic interests of the state? And what are the present economic issues? #1, how do we make sure that nobody is left behind in our economic journey? How do we create jobs for our young people? How do we increase our manufacturing from the present 7% to about 20% by 2030? So all these relationships and ties outside there should help us to come up with a supportive ecosystem that will enable us to achieve that. And by doing that, we'll have achieved a bottom-up economic transformation agenda and also meet the various targets under Vision 2030. Thank you very much. Okay, so it's officially closed for today.
Yeah, thank you, PS, for those comprehensive reflections. So with that, I want to invite Ambassador Eliphas Barine, Political Diplomatic Affairs, the Director General in the State Department for Foreign Affairs, to give a vote of thanks. Balozi, karibu.
Thank you very much. Loud of applause to a very, very engaging, resourceful panel that we've had this afternoon. I know all of us had very heavy lunch, but I didn't see any one of us wink, and therefore that really demonstrates how captivating the discussions were. Permit me at the onset to express the regrets of the PS, Dr. Korir Sing'oei, for having taken off a break due to very pressing commitments. It was his desire to be here throughout. But thank you very much, PS, Dr. Honorable Mangeni, for really standing in for the PS and the team that is all here. First and foremost is to express the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs, in particular the State Department of Foreign Affairs, appreciation to those that honor the invitation. It is not every time invitation go out and you find 100% turnout, and therefore that is why I should really plead with you that once again we clap our hands so that those that joined us and helped us to begin to reflect on this very important topic. Is a topic that has been on the table for quite a long time. What is the interface between commercial diplomacy and what has been characterized in other instances as traditional diplomacy? Where is the interface and how do they both connect? I think it is a conversation today has just been a phase of ideation whereby we will be reflecting to ask ourselves, after this, what? Because substantive issues have come to the floor about when you go out and you have all these campaigns about investment coming into this space, what happens? Have we really realized, when they arrive, have they been able to find the environment to operate from? Second, can you actually sell that which you do not have? Third, what is the cost of living? Fourth, should we continue to export products or should we continue to export labor? I think these are some of the issues, and obviously who are the producers, and very, very scintillating was the statement that has been put forth by the peers, speaking about who and the character of the Kenyan production. The Kenyan production is SMSEs, and therefore how do we scale them up to be able to reach out to that? I know there are immense frameworks that are in place, and what I think Dr. Masila will need to reflect a little more is after we close this evening, at what point we come back to ask ourselves, since we sat down for 3 hours, what next? I think it requires conversation and continuous engagement with the brains that are around here, because Kenyan is endowed with so much of this brain. Kenya is endowed with so much of this idea. But I think the whole question of how do we aggregate, how do we work together, how do we build that teamwork remains fundamental for us to be able to realize the vision of the leadership and the vision of Kenya, so that we have Kenyans with jobs and Kenyans that can be meaningfully deployed out of the resource that we have, particularly the human capital. And so, because we have been seated for a long time, I don't want to do an exercise, ask you to rise and do an exercise. The invitation I have is there's a cup of coffee and tea out there. So after this, I want to extend invitation for a cup of coffee, but the important assignment I had, I hear my simple assignment. I have the least assignment to work on. This is important, is really to extend very warm thanks to each and everyone that is seated on this hall, and remind you that tomorrow morning we have another very, very exciting round of conversations that speaks to diaspora matters. And we will be having the diaspora, both that have just flown into the country and those that will be logging from wherever they will be, but it will be something that none of us would like to miss. With those very many words, thank you very much, and do have a lovely evening. God bless you. Thank you.